Earlier this week, a 16-year-old named Blaze Jordan won the high school home run derby at Progressive Field. And with what he's doing, he's been drawing comparisons to what Bryce Harper did when he was in high school. So what I want to do today is actually take a look at the two and try to kind of figure out what they do that allow them to hit the ball so far at such a young age with such underdeveloped bodies. So on the left here is Blaze Jordan. I'll play his swing through here couple times so you can get a feel for his tempo, for his rhythm, and his overall movement. And then on the right here, of course, we have Harper, back in high school, so this is at the same showcase. Both of them hit balls well over 450 feet. So the thing that really jumps out and what I want to focus on is essentially the torque that they're able to create. And I want to talk not only about the torque that they're able to create, but also some ways that we go about with our training, kind of developing the aspects that are required to get into these types of positions. So as Jordan here on the left goes through his load and works in a foot plant, we're going to see him get into this position here. So this is really I don't think it's required for you to get into this position to be a good hitter. But I do think with what we're seeing with a lot of guys that hit the ball extremely far, or kind of, astronomically farther than their peers, is they get into these types of extreme positions. So we have Jordan there on the left, and then we have Harper here on the right, and you're going to see in both of these clips that they have a ton of essentially hip and shoulder dissociation going on here. You might call it hip-shoulder separation, but the back knee, the hips are open, right, and the upper half is still turned back. And again, pretty much all good hitters get to this position. It's just that these two guys and other hitters that tend to hit the ball farther than everyone else tend to get into these positions just a little bit better than their peers. So, we might see this back hip not quite as far open, or we might see their pelvis leak forward a little bit. But what these guys are able to do is get that rear hip open with that pelvis still tucked, kind of like down and under, and with the hand still by the back shoulder, and the torso still mostly closed. So he's creating a tremendous stretch here across his torso, and we see the same thing with Harper, right? When he gets into this position here, we can see his hands are still up by that back shoulder. The pelvis is working open, and Harper lands a little bit more closed, so again, his pelvis doesn't look quite as open, but if we were to look from the front, we would see very similar positions. It's just that the end position that it gets to is a little bit more closed than Blaze here on the left. But we see with both of them, this back knee is pretty much all the way open, and they're creating tremendous torso or stretch across their torso. Right, we're able to see the lines stretch on their jersey. So what this allows them to do is now take and release this energy very quickly. So from here, and then all they have to do is now release the barrel, and all of that kind of winding up that happens throughout their torso from the ground all the way up through their shoulders. Right, we know with K-Vest, a lot of their data is coming back that we know obviously it's important to go lower half, torso, shoulders, and then hands. These guys just seem to do it better than everyone else. So once they have that energy stored up, it's just a matter of releasing it with a very clean turn, very clean rotation. Right, we see during their actual turn, both of these guys, their heads. If I put my mouse over his head, it's going to stay very still. If I put my mouse over his head, it's going to stay very still. So their rotation after that point is very quick and is very clean. So essentially what's happening is if I pull up this clip here, this is just basically an anatomical demonstration of what happens when we go through torso rotation. So I'll go ahead and restart this at the start. And we can see that as the upper half here turns against the pelvis, we see these tissues here kind of get wound up, right? So you can almost think about it as wringing out a rag, where these torsos are getting, or these tissues are getting wound up, and then what that's going to allow them to do is then release into the baseball. So the more that you can wind those tissues up, the more energy that you're going to have to release. Franz Bosch talks about this in his book. He refers to it as muscle slack, but really the more the more tension you're able to create through that winding, the more you're going to have to unleash into the baseball. So, with that being said, it's great that we understand what these two guys do that allow them to hit the ball so far, hit the ball so hard, right? They get into these extreme positions that allow them to produce more power than their peers that are the same age that probably have similar strength levels. But what can we do to actually develop that? So one thing that we'll do is kind of specialize or put a focus on hip mobility, specifically internal and external rotation. So to get into these types of positions, you need very good internal rotation, range of motion of this rear hip. You also need good internal rotation stability of this front hip in order for it to not basically like fall out to the side. But in addition to that, you also need good external rotation mobility in this lead leg. So two things that we'll do are hip internal rotation cars.
For the hip internal rotation, pails/rails, you're going to need something like this wall that you can lock your pelvis or your torso down to so that it's not moving and we're getting true movement from the actual hip joint. But what we're going to do is get into that position, bring our leg up to roughly 90 degrees, then we're going to be taking our leg out to the side here, right? So as far as you can, out this way. So once we've done that, and again, we're trying to keep our pelvis locked onto the wall and our torso also onto the wall. So once we've done that, we're going to go and see what our end range internal rotation range of motion is. So for me, it's right there. Once we've gotten there, we're now going to press against our hand here for 5 seconds. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. At the end of that 5, we're going to try pulling our leg further into internal rotation.
And then for external rotation, we'll also do the hip external rotation pails rails.
For the hip external rotation, pail/rails, you're going to need something like this broom handle or dowel rod to support you. But what you're going to do is bring your hip up to 90 degrees so that it's level with hip height. And then we're going to go into external rotation of our hip. So once you're into that external rotation position, a couple things we're looking for is that you're not just dumping, right? We don't want to let ourselves just kind of dump here to the right. We want to maintain posture and make sure that that movement is coming straight from our hip joint. So if you need like a mirror or something to be able to see whether you're doing that correctly, use that. But once you're here and you're into that end range external rotation, you're going to take your hand and you're going to be pushing into it as hard as you can for 5 seconds. So again, when we're pushing into it, we're trying to activate our groin and our hip, this region, not pushing with everything else. So here, end range, push, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, relax, and then you should be able to go a little bit further into external rotation, again, without dumping.
So in addition to these exercises, those are going to kind of take care of what we want to have happen in terms of actual mobility of our midsection, right? They're going to give us a greater chance to dissociate our hips from our shoulders to get into those better positions. But in addition to that, we also want to build strength, power, and speed rotationally so that we can unwind those tissues in our torso faster once we've gotten into and once we're flowing through that position. So these are two exercises that we use that are a little bit different. A lot of people use, pal-off presses. They use med ball throws. We've actually found through EMG readings that these produce a little bit better muscle activity, and they're going to basically allow us to learn how to fire our tissues faster and kind of just speed up that connection when we're going to launch the rotation in our swing. So this first one, what Jared's going to do here is have a kettlebell strung through a band, and what he's going to be doing is taking it forward and backward against. So what he has to do here is brace anteriorly and posteriorly, but it's more of a dynamic brace. So this is not like a pal-off press. This is much more similar to what we're going to have to do in a swing, where as the kettlebell is shifting back, he's got to resist that that energy that's going behind him, and then as the kettlebell then swings forward, it has to resist in the opposite direction. So that's going to create much more stability when we get into this position here that we see with Harper, right? This is pretty much the same position that we're mimicking. So he's going to be much more stable in this position now after you've trained with this exercise. So that's one that we'll use. And then another one that we'll use is this one here. And what this is doing is essentially training the acceleration and deceleration ability of our pelvis in relation to our torso. So you can see that as I move my hands back, right, as the hands go back here, the pelvis is going to come forward. And we're training this at very high speeds with highest force. Again, we've done EMG readings on these as well. But you can see that if I play it in full motion, notice what the pelvis is doing in relation to the hands. So you see a very small pelvis tuck as the hands are moving. And what that's training us to do is, again, work with the pelvis and work with the shoulders in opposition of each other, dissociate them from each other to be able to then deliver greater force in our actual swing. I want to take the time to thank you guys for watching this video, for educating yourself. Obviously, if you made it through this whole thing, you're serious about your development. So if you would like to learn more from us or learn more about our remote programming option, I can be reached through email at brady@dacbaseball.com. That's brady@dacbaseball.com. You can find us on Twitter, on Instagram, if you just search for DAC Baseball. And you can also find us on our website at www.dacbaseball.com.